It was 2022. I was living alone in this small town. What began that night was just an ordinary classified ad. Or at least, that's what I thought. There was something I didn't know. My little house sat on the outskirts of town, down a road hardly anyone used. I thought it would be perfect for me. Not just for a fresh start, but to get away from everything I wanted to leave behind. Here, nobody knew me. I didn't know anyone either. At first, that felt peaceful. But as the nights passed, I started to realize how exposed it felt. Being completely alone in a place where no one would notice if something happened. On nights when the wind rustled the trees and the streetlights flickered out one by one, the silence of the house began to feel heavy. That night, I was sitting in the kitchen, scrolling through my laptop. My list of things I still needed for the house was long, but at the top was a washing machine. While browsing online, I found an ad at a reasonable price. In the picture, it looked a little used, but still in good shape. The seller's name was Mike. We exchanged a few messages. His replies were short, cold. He said he could bring it over at 8 p.m. Then, at 6:45, I got a text. "I'm near your address. Can I come a little early?" I said yes, but the time passed and no one came. A few minutes later, I messaged him. "Where are you? Are you coming?" No answer. By midnight, I was restless. I went to the window. Outside, rain had turned the street into a glistening sheet under the flickering yellow glow of the street lamps. A thin mist drifted along the sidewalk. At the far end of the street, a black pickup appeared, its headlights dim. It rolled forward slowly, then stopped. The cab was completely dark. I couldn't see the driver. It just sat there. I didn't think much of it. I turned off the lights and went to my bedroom. But a few minutes later, there were 3 loud knocks at the door. When I opened it, a large, pale-faced man stood there, drenched from the rain. He wore a thick but dirty coat. Water dripped from his shoulders, pooling on the concrete. His hair clung to his forehead. His eyes stared straight into mine, unblinking. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice hoarse, as if the words were scraped from his throat. "My truck broke down. The machine's in the back. Can you help me move it?" There was urgency in his tone, but not the normal kind. It was the kind that made my skin prickle. The kind that says, "This needs to be done fast, for reasons you don't want to know." I hesitated. I didn't want to leave him standing there in the rain. "All right," I said, though my gut told me not to. We walked through the garden to the back of his truck. Cold rain slid down my neck, seeping under my collar. He opened the rear door, and I froze. It wasn't the machine from the ad. This one was much older. Rust stained its edges, paint peeled in strips, deep scratches marked the front panel. It looked more like scrap metal than anything usable. "I'm sorry," I said. "This isn't the same machine. I can't take it." The man's expression didn't change. He just stared at me for a long moment. The darkness around him made his blank eyes even more unsettling. Then his lips moved. "You'll take it." He didn't shout. He didn't try to convince me. He simply commanded. The certainty in his voice sent a cold jolt down my spine. My instinct screamed, "Get inside." Now I turned without another word and hurried back to the house. As soon as I closed the door, I locked it, then slid the chain into place. Peeking through the curtain, I saw him still in my garden, moving slowly, almost searching for something. Then, with sudden violence, he kicked a flower pot across the yard, sending soil flying. He walked up to my door and, without warning, began pounding on it, hard. "You're a liar," he shouted. "You have to take this." His voice carried anger, but something else too. desperation, and that mix made it even more terrifying. With shaking hands, I grabbed my phone and called the police. My fingers fumbled on the screen. My voice trembled as I spoke. The pounding kept coming. Each hit rattled the frame. Then, silence. I peeked outside. He was walking back to his truck. He climbed in, started it, and rolled away slowly. His face stayed hidden in the dark as he passed under the streetlights. Only when his headlights turned the corner and disappeared did I finally exhale. When the police arrived, they found broken pottery, fresh scratches on the doorframe, and large muddy footprints in the garden. I told them everything. They searched the area, but there was no trace of him. They gave me a few safety tips before leaving. But that night never left me. The sound of rain on the windows, the sight of a dark street, they no longer felt peaceful. Because I knew now, somewhere out there, that man was still looking for someone to take it. I will never forget that night. Whenever the rain grows heavier and the sky lights up with lightning, my mind drifts back to those moments. Behind the wheel, in the middle of nowhere, on that rural road where darkness swallowed me, where no one could hear me, and those headlights approaching. It was the last days of November 2023. The weather had been gloomy all day, but the rain only began in the late afternoon. I was driving home from work, facing about a 5-hour journey. I planned to reach the city before midnight. I set out with only the coffee I had poured into my thermos, a few snacks, and my phone. At first, everything seemed normal. As I drove along the highway, the road signs, city lights, and occasional passing cars gave me a sense of security. But when I turned off the main road onto the rural roads, the scenery changed. Streetlights vanished. The houses along the road grew sparse, then disappeared completely. The asphalt stretched out before me like a wet, black ribbon, and I could see only as far as my headlights illuminated. The rain started as a fine mist, and the wipers moved smoothly across the windshield. But soon it turned into a heavy downpour, so much so that the wipers couldn't keep up, and my visibility dropped quickly. Lightning occasionally lit up the sky, briefly showing me the surrounding fields, the bare trees in the distance, and the occasional collapsed fence. Thunder followed, echoing loudly in my ears, even inside the car. My shoulders tensed as I gripped the steering wheel. Then a strange sound came from the engine. At first, I thought it was the wind or the rain playing tricks on me. I couldn't be sure without turning down the radio. Then the sound came again, muffled, metallic, as if something was scraping or trying to break free. A sense of unease crept over me. "Please, not here in the middle of nowhere," I muttered. But the car began to slow down. I pressed the gas pedal, but it didn't respond. My heart raced. The road ahead, lit only by the headlights, seemed to narrow, as if it might close in on me at any moment. Finally, the car came to a complete stop. I pulled the handbrake. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. I considered opening the hood, but the rain was so heavy that it was almost impossible to get out. I checked my phone. There was no signal. The indicator stared back at me like a cold warning. I looked around. There wasn't a single light in sight. No houses, no streetlights. Only in the brief flashes of lightning could I see the dark fields and tree trunks. Then everything plunged back into pitch blackness. I sat in the car for a while, listening to the rain pounding on the metal roof. My only option was to hope for help from passing vehicles. For about 20 minutes, shivering in the cold, I raised my hand whenever I saw headlights. 5 or 6 cars passed. None stopped. They all sped away into the darkness. No one wants to take a risk in this weather, I thought. Then I saw headlights approaching slowly in the distance. This car was moving much slower than the others. It seemed to notice me and was going to stop. A small sense of relief stirred. Finally, someone will help, I said to myself. When the car pulled up beside me, it stopped. It was an old, dark-colored sedan. The windows were fogged and I couldn't see inside. The driver slowly rolled down the window. At that moment, when I saw the man's face, an invisible knot formed in my throat. His expression was blank, and there was a strange, fixed gleam in his eyes. "What's the problem?" he asked, but there was no real curiosity in his voice. It was as if he already knew the answer and was just asking as a formality. "My car broke down, and my phone isn't working. Can you help me?" I said. The man stared silently for a few seconds. Then he said, "Sure, get in the car. I'll take you." But it wasn't an offer. It felt more like an order. His tone implied that I had to get in. A chill ran through me. "Thank you, but I'll wait for a tow truck," I said, politely declining and stepping back. His eyes locked on me for a moment. Then he closed the window without a word and drove away slowly. Just as I began to relax a little, the car stopped ahead. The door opened. The man stepped out into the rain, holding a flashlight. At that moment, panic hit me like an alarm. I ran to my car and locked the doors, hands clenched on the steering wheel, shaking. As the rain fell harder, he started walking around my car. The flashlight's beam shone through the windows, sometimes checking the door handles, sometimes moving toward the trunk. I grabbed my phone. Miraculously, I caught a single bar of signal. I quietly called the police. My voice trembled as I tried to describe my location, but there were no signs or markers around me. At that moment, the man vanished. Only the sound of the rain remained, until the sound of a door closing in the distance, then an engine. An old pickup truck, headlights off, slowly drove away. It had no license plate, and the back was covered in mud. For a while I couldn't say anything. Darkness, rain, cold, and that lingering feeling inside me. I took a deep breath as police sirens approached. When the car lights hit the muddy road, the footprints around my car were still visible. At that moment, I realized that if that door had opened, I wouldn't be telling this story today. I experienced this event exactly 1 year ago. My roommate had left town for a few weeks. It was spring break at university, and I had the house all to myself. Normally, this situation gives me great peace of mind. I enjoy being alone, lost in my own thoughts in the silence. But that week, the weather was so heavy, so gloomy that this solitude brought both peace and a strange unease. That night was an ordinary Monday evening. The city had surrendered to a storm I hadn't seen in a long time. The wind was shaking the trees, branches were hitting the walls of the houses, and the roofs were rumbling. The rain was pounding on the windows non-stop, as if the outside world was being constantly battered. At one point, the power went out, and the house was completely plunged into darkness. Only the howling of the wind and the unceasing sound of the rain remained. Sitting between the walls of that house, in the midst of the chaos outside, gave me a strange sense of security. I had planned to go to bed early, but the storm was so loud that it was impossible. I turned on the TV, wrapped myself in a blanket, and chose a show to watch. As the clock approached 1 a.m., the doorbell rang. I froze. At 1 in the morning, who could be at my door in this rain? I peered out through the small window in the door at the end of the hallway. It was empty. When I opened the door slightly, the rain hit my face. There was no one around. When I returned to my seat, the roar outside had grown even louder. Not even a few minutes had passed when I heard a loud crack from the backyard. I peeked through the curtains. The table and chairs on the porch had been knocked over by the wind. My unease mingled with a sense of responsibility. I grabbed my raincoat and went outside to prevent further damage. The rain was pelting my face in sharp drops. As I tried to lift the overturned leg of the table, my eye caught the pine tree in the corner of the garden. There, someone in a hoodie was standing there. They were staring at me without moving. I couldn't make out their face. The darkness and rain combined to make them look almost like a shadow. But there's a weight to a glance. I felt that weight down to my bones. My heart raced. I let go of the chair and ran into the house, locking the door behind me. I peeked through the curtains. No one was there. I told myself, maybe it's a neighbor taking a shortcut through the garden. But even then, that excuse didn't feel convincing. I watched the outside for minutes. There was no movement. I didn't want to go upstairs. The sound of the wind hitting the roof was even more frightening there. I curled up on the couch downstairs, wrapped in a blanket. I fell asleep to the rhythm of the rain and the roar, my eyelids growing heavy. I don't know how long I slept. When I opened my eyes, the house was unusually quiet, but this silence was not peaceful. It was tense. As I tried to fall asleep again, I heard a faint tapping sound. At first I thought it was the sound of the wind, but the tapping repeated. It was coming from in front of the door. I slowly sat up and walked to the window. There was someone crouched in front of the door, in the rain. Their back was turned to me, but they were inserting a metal object into the door lock and turning it. At that moment, my mind went blank. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my breath was caught in my throat. Suddenly, the door opened slightly. I panicked and ran to hold the door shut. At that very moment, in the dark space between the door and the frame, our eyes met. It was a soaking, wet silhouette. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel him looking at me. My eyes locked onto his, and his eyes locked onto mine. He didn't move for a moment. He placed his hand on the door frame. It was as if he was trying to decide what to do. Then slowly, it stepped back. I didn't even hear its footsteps. Under the rain, it slipped into the backyard. Its shadow faded away among the trees, swaying in the wind. Shivering, I closed the door and turned the lock. I ran to check all the windows. I took my phone and called the police, despite my trembling fingers. The police arrived shortly. They examined the garden. The flashlight revealed clear footprints in the mud. They started from the front door and led to the garden entrance. But they ended there. There was no continuation. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. Nothing had been stolen from the house. The doors were secure. But this was no coincidence or misunderstanding. This was a clear observation and a silent message given to me. After the police left, I was alone in the house. The storm had subsided, but its roar still echoed in my ears. I wrapped myself in a blanket. I sat there with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling. And in that moment, I realized my eyes still felt the gaze I had seen in that dark void. And a thought etched itself into my mind. Perhaps the person standing at the door that night still planned to return one day. What do you think that person truly wanted? Have you had similar experiences while living alone? Share your thoughts in the comments.